doesn't she look happy? Yes, I do. And much younger. That was taken 2.5 years ago. And I was proud of myself for getting this in my car and getting it home all by myself. And she's a beauty. An armoire from Goodwill. She has a total of 4 drawers. She's totally of wood construction. So interesting. The hardware is lovely. And so I was so excited to get started. So why is this still around 2.5 years later? Well, because it was naughty and ended up in the timeout zone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's get started. Of course, the first thing I did was remove all of the hardware so that I could give it a good deep cleaning. Everything was marked and labeled, so I knew exactly where to put those types of elements back. That drop hardware, so pretty. And the hardware on the drawers, I knew I was going to modify them. Of course, I labeled the drawers so that when it was done, everything would fit back right? I'll need to pull those out. They're little staples, so I'll just bang them out with the hammer from the other side. There we go. I'm going to mark on the back of the hinge that this was the right side top, because I want to make sure this gets back on the correct side in the event that some of the screw holes are a little different than the other door. It was super labor intensive to remove the hinges and all the magnetic pieces to keep the doors shut. However, I've discovered that one of the hinges is missing its little finial. I've looked everywhere, I can't find it. I think I may have bought it that way. But in the meantime, all of the hinges are marked. This is the left side on the top, and all of the various screws are marked as well. So I'm ready to clean. I knew I wanted to remove that back plate. Now, 2.5 years ago, I did this with a Dremel, and I will link that video in the description below. Nowadays, I do it with a bolt cutter. I will include a link for one of those videos as well, but those arrows are pointing to a circle that you can snip up to, and it releases those little knobs and leaves you with this. So that's what they look like after that back plate was removed. The piece was thoroughly cleaned with hot water and Dawn dish detergent. I wanted to be sure to get rid of all the dirt, the grime, any mold that might be there, oily fingerprints, furniture polish. Everything needs to be removed, but you also need to rinse that off with clean fresh water to remove any soapy residue as well. After everything was wiped off, I'll put it out in the sun. You'll see it come out in just a moment, and everything dried there. I brought everything indoors and started to scuff sand. Now, my original intent was to leave some elements raw wood, but you can see right there those dark lines. The drawers were stained, and you'll see it later on. I ended up having to paint them because of the staining. But this was back when I still had my SurfPrep. And the one thing that I loved about it was that foam interface pad and the foam abrasive pads to get around these curved areas. I do miss that, but if you recall, I think I'm the only one that didn't like my SurfPrep because it left those annoying pigtail curls every time I used it. But I do miss the ability to sand these curved edges. Okay, do you remember when I took this off? Well, it came off beautifully, but it left some glue residue. So let me show you how I'm gonna take it off. There are heat guns that you can purchase from Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever. When you're doing this, always move your putty knife in the direction of the wood grain. Over time, that heat will loosen the glue and you can scrape it. You just have to keep moving that heat tool so you don't end up burning the wood. I have finally finished prepping the piece. It has been properly washed, sanded, scuff sanded. I've wiped it down for dust. I've taped off what I needed to tape. I have about an hour before I have to clean up and head out for the night. So I think what I'm gonna do is prime the drawers, since some of them were sanded down all the way down, like this one. I'm toying with the idea as to whether I'm going to spray this ultimately outside or not. It would go quicker, and this is such a big piece if I sprayed it naturally, but it's so hot and muggy right now, and the bugs will end up getting in the paint. The paint I want to use is a Valspar cabinet and furniture paint. I've used it before. It does take a little bit longer to dry, and so I'm probably gonna bite the bullet and just hand paint the piece in here because it's so humid outside. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going to prime everything, but I definitely wanted to do the drawers. I may end up priming that piece too, because as I've said before, oftentimes when you prime, you notice cracks or dings in your furniture that you didn't notice otherwise that need to be fixed before you paint. So anyway, I'm going to quickly throw on some primer on at least the drawers, and then I've got to clean up and head out for the night. So we got back from dinner last night, and I started to paint primer on the doors, and one thing led to another. I ended up priming the entire thing. So, and it was really fun. I enjoyed it. It's finally paint day. I'm very excited. So I have everything moved out in the garage. I have caulked some little areas with paintable caulk. I have it in an odd container because my caulk tube dried out. But anyway, I caulked the little cracks and crevices that were made evident with the primer. And I'm ready to paint. Now I'm using Valspar's cabinet and furniture paint in Caviar, but let me note, there are two different Caviar blacks out there. There's one by Valspar, there's one by Sherwin-Williams. This is Sherwin-Williams version of Caviar, just so you know. I've gone ahead and filtered the paint into my Wagner Flexio. And that's real important in the event that there are any little debris in your paint. You don't want it to clog up the nozzle of your sprayer. So I have filtered the paint, and I've wiped down the pieces with a tack cloth to make sure all the dust is removed, and we're ready to go. I'm getting ready to put the second and final coat of paint on my armoire. Now, again, I'm using Valspar's cabinet and furniture paint. And what I like about this paint is that when it fully cures, it is rock hard, resistant to scratching. But the downside is it does take 4 weeks to fully cure. And I'm not up to storing this piece of furniture for 4 weeks before I list it. So what I'm going to do, in fact, I've already started, I am going to use a little bit of Topcoat in this mixture of paint. I'm using Minwax's polyacrylic in clear matte. I have about this much of the polyacrylic, and I'm going to fill the rest of the container with the black paint. Now, if I have excess paint, I'll just store it because I use this paint quite a bit. I'll just put it back in this can right here and we'll mark it that it's both paint and polyacrylic. I'm also painting one other item in this black paint, so I figured I pretty much need a full container. All right, now I need to clean up the hardware. I did try boiling them in the handles in some equal parts water and white vinegar, and then scrubbed them with Barkeeper's Friend, and the handles did beautifully. However, the little teardrop ones did not. I don't know why that is. So I'm going to go ahead, and while I'm at it, spray paint the long hinges as well as all the magnetic pieces. I'm going to go ahead and spray paint them with Krylon's metallic gold leaf. Now I have to be super careful because I don't want to gunk up the hinges, so I will be doing some very light coats of paint. For the little beads for the handles, I just attached it to a hanger, and I'm going to spray paint them and then hang them somewhere to dry. So I've been thinking that the gold spray paint's just a little too yellowy brassy, especially the hinges. And so what I've done was I've applied some Dixie Belle Best Dang Wax in black all over them and kind of didn't wipe all of it off, and it just tones it down. What happens? A little black wax on it. Okay. It's more muted here than it is there. Okay, so I brought the piece in to the dining room and I put on all the hardware. I reattached all of the magnetic pieces, and then I went to start attaching the doors. And what happened was that as I went to close them, especially this door, it was rubbing up against this area. And it scuffed up all the paint terribly here. I've since sanded it and repainted it. And so what I did at the time was I sanded the underside enough so that it would finally close. I did the same thing over here because this door appeared to be rubbing up against the area right back here. So I sanded that and was relieved to find out that it now made a clearance. So I went to put the two doors on, and this is what's happening. Now it won't close. So let me show you what I did figure out. And I think it's all because I took the hardware off. I will never do that again. But let me show you where I found a glitch. See how there's very little room here between the base of it and the cabinet door? Over here, there's a great big gap, which is causing this door to sag this way, which is why it now overlaps. But I've investigated, guys, and I cannot figure it out. The way that this part of the hinge sits in the space between the armoire and the door is identical over here. Then I looked over here. These are not flush against the side of the armoire. They stick out a little bit. See how this is flush? They cut enough on the door for this to be inset. So, but this side isn't, okay? It wasn't constructed that way. And yet, even though this isn't flush here, well, it's not flush over here either. What I'm going to try is I'm going to take these screws out, and I'm going to use larger screws. This one, it's a 1/4 inch longer. I'm hoping that once that's set into the piece, it'll push the cabinet door further in and will close up this gap. I think this is a stretch as a solution, but I thought it'd be worth a try. Nope, that didn't help at all. All right, so here's another thing that I can do, but I don't have the right tools today. See this little area that was created so that this piece would be flush? Even though that's not how I bought it, maybe if I can create a bigger area here to set this plate flush, maybe it'll shift this door closer. And if I can't use my Dremel, I need to order some chisels. But y'all, I couldn't do it. I was so fed up. It just was put in the timeout zone right there in my dining room for 2.5 years. I mean, look, it's still there for a wine tasting that we had in October of 23. And then that's the next month for Thanksgiving. And it was still there when my sister and her husband visited in July of 25. Y'all, it's crazy. It wasn't until we were prepping for my 60th birthday cocktail party that Kevin and I thought, we've got to get it out, because we needed room to make room for people to dance and eat and cocktail. See, you can see where the bar is set up. It's not there anymore. So let me tell you what I did. What I need to do is somehow figure out how to further inset that top hinge so that it's within the wood, not resting on top of it. I don't know how I'm going to do that with chisels. Maybe I'll pull out my Dremel too. I don't know. But I'm going to outline it with chisels first. All else fails, I'll put the cabinet door back on and just sand the side for the doors to be able to close. Hopefully these aren't hollow doors, because I'm hoping I won't be sanding into a hollow cavity. All right, this isn't budging onto the Dremel. I think this is working as far as fitting. See, it's flush. The holes weren't lining up, so I had to chisel out a little bit more on this side, which means that side is now exposed, but I can at the very least touch it up with paint, but I will also try to fill that in if this works. So let's go ahead and reattach. It ain't pretty, but I'm hoping it helps. Okay, let's see how they close now. This side first. It still needs to be sanded because it's not quite closing. I do have a little container of touch-up paint that I had set aside when I did this 2.5 years ago. So I'll have that to touch up where I need to. And I do have another gallon of it, but you know, when they're mixed at different times, they are potentially not an exact match. So I'll be using the touch-up pot of paint. So fortunately, I had set aside quite a bit. But y'all look, even though I got all that scraped off, I knew I needed to take out the big guns. I took the drawer back off, we went outside, and I used my skill saw to cut off as much as I needed to make those doors close. But right there, my skill saw didn't go all the way down because of that little elevated lip. I had to finish by hand. Oh my gosh. I'm pretty sure this is oak, and oak is very, very hard wood. It took forever, but I got it off. All right. I'm going to do a test close, hopefully one last time, because I'm hoping at this point all I have to do is some simple sanding. And if it doesn't close this time, or if I've ruined it, I'm just going to go ahead and cry. Y'all, it closes. It's closed. I mean, it only took procrastinating 2.5 years to make that happen. I swear to you, guys, I could cry with joy. Let's look at what this piece looked like 2.5 years ago and how she turned out. If you're not familiar with my channel, I haven't done so already, I would love it if you could subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and leave me some comments below as to what you think. I always enjoy responding.